Alright guys, Jack here, JBF Music and Guitar Lessons. So what I've got for you today is an analysis rather than just a straight reaction to Sokoninaru, Sokoninaru, let me know how much I butcher this name, and their song Brilliant City. I'm thinking it's a bit of an experiment. I might put this analysis out first and the straight reaction afterwards, just to see what happens with the algorithm. It's always worth experimenting with these things just to see what works and what doesn't. These guys have been suggested to me a ton, and I'm glad I finally got around to listening to them. Well worth the wait and well worth the anticipation. Do yourself have a suggestion, make sure to help patreon.com/JBF Music, or if you just want to support the channel. And on that note, I would like to take the time to give a massive thank you and a huge shout out to Rabbi Rabs, Matt Hortzman, Glenn Kelly, Stephen Williams and Rebecca Hay. Thanks so much for your continued support on Patreon. So you may notice here I have changed guitar yet again. I've had 3 guitars I think I've been through today with these videos. So I've used this one, which is a heavily modified Ibanez guitar. The reason I've used this is because if when you watch the reaction, it might be out first, it might not be, I'm not too sure what order I'm doing these in. I mumbled something about P90 Pickups, so I'll just jump to a frame where we can see it, because this is kind of somewhat, right here, great. So you see those white pickups, and how they've just got kind of screws in the middle of them. So the pickups, I'll put a little arrow explaining it, but it's the white things underneath the strings, they pick up the sound, I suspect from the name. I can look at them and I can tell they're P90s because that's how P90s work. These ones are black rather than white, but it's the same idea. There's screws in the middle, and that's basically where the sound's picked up from. What makes P90s different from other pickups is I think they're one of the kind of original ones. They're much more dynamic and tend to have a lot more high end, a lot more sparkle. So if I just play a chord, and if I play it really softly, so there's a huge dynamic range. A lot of modern pickups tend to compress things more, which for certain types of music like metal or kind of heavy rock is great, because then if you hit a note a bit softer by mistake, instead of being like disappearing, it was prominent in the mix. P90s are great for kind of actually bluesy kind of lead playing where you want it to be really expressive, so you want to be able where you want that extreme kind of dynamic range. But they also were quite popular in some grunge stuff and also kind of shoegaze, because you do get this really lovely, pristine, kind of clean sound from them. If you are interested in how I kind of modified this guitar and failed dramatically while doing so, I'll put a link to the video explaining that with the eye up there. The reason I mentioned this at the start is because it is really quite an important part of their sound, is this kind of high, spanky, kind of spangly. There's a modern guitar tone that's incredibly compressed and very kind of like very breathy, very airy, and I'd say this does a good job of dipping its toe in the water but not going fully down that rabbit hole, because I think that sound's going to be pretty dated in the next 5 to 10 years as things are. You know, a new sound comes up and it sounds fresh, then it gets left and it becomes quite, you know, fixed to a time. Although that's not really happened with auto-tune on vocals yet, so it might just be a sound that sticks around. Anyway, there's going to be a ton of pausing and breaking down of interesting musical concepts and stuff that's going on here. If that's not your bag, I apologise, but you've been warned. So let's start at the start, because that seems to make sense. So here you can hear that high kind of scratchy, trebly, kind of really nice present guitar tone straight from the get-go. There'll be a bit of kind of attack on the strings, a fairly clean sound, maybe a tiny bit of gain, probably not much compression if any at all, maybe in the post-production, and these P90 pickups adding in that kind of chime. There's a really cool thing there on the left speaker when we come in, because by and large the guitar is mostly panned to the right here. There's a muted guitar going. You listen to it just when it kicks in. About here. Doubling up the drum fill. 2, 3, 4, 1. Oh, it's actually in the right as well. It might not be in the left at all. I might be speaking nonsense. That's a really cool trick. So instead of it just being the drum fill, there's like an extra burst of volume in terms of your dynamics here. Little extra pop before it comes in. A lot of time when you do this extra pop, you make something louder before a new section. The new section doesn't need to be louder. It kind of tricks our brain into thinking, oh, it's much bigger already, because there's been this extra kind of crescendo, fancy word of saying things getting louder leading into it. And there's really kind of nice chord voicings here with this great kind of scratchy sound. And it's a really cool bass technique here. So they're using their thumb to tap, which is really unusual. I've not seen that before. Normally when people tap, we use, you know, our first finger or second finger. Here it looks like they're using kind of the tip or side of their thumb, which might be to do with being able to integrate slapping and tap techniques together. I don't know, it's something I've never encountered before and something I will need to look into. Which is great. It's, you know, 13 seconds into a song and it's like, okay, well here's something I've never really seen before and I know very little about. And here, this is something I talked about quite a lot, the delay in there. I'm a bit out of tune. Right, so that sounds like the basic melody here. Where is it on the guitar? Do 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 do. It's something to that effect. What there is there's a ton of delay on and it makes it sound huge and epic, or maybe some reverb. So I'll start to put those on my guitar and you can kind of hear how it informs the sound. So I've got my guitar patch up here. I'm just using digital stuff because it's much easier than miking up a guitar and annoying all your neighbours. So you can see I've already got a reverb block here, which is fairly subtle, and a delay one. So when I play something, there is a tiny amount of reverb and delay. I've mixed it down really low. You can see here where it says mix 15.1%. So if I move this up a lot more, you can start to hear a bit more of a kind of a tail. So instead of it being a dead stop, I put both of them off, for example. That's it. Put it back on. There's a reverb, and the delay is incredibly subtle here as well. If I move that up, what have I got it sounding like? Yeah, so just a little bit delay. I'll pop those back to where they were so I don't mess up my general sound. But what they've done here is they've got like a much bigger delay and reverb probably combined. So I'd say something like a hallway or gymnasium. So these are like simulating different environments. You got like general ambience, you got chambers, a drum room, which would be a kind of fairly small, kind of tight reverb. And then you've got stuff like small cathedral. I might go with small cathedral and see how that's gonna. Yeah, cool. So you can see there, or here, there's quite a big tail. I'm going to move the reverb time up more. I'm going to move the room size up a bit more as well. I just want this to be huge. For my delay, what will I use? Maybe a lo-fi tape, maybe a ping pong. Let's go with the lo-fi tape for now, because that might add a nice kind of bit of vibe here. So if I just isolate this, so I just have the delay. Yeah, that's kind of cool. It's a bit too in time, but it's got a really nice, if you listen to the sound, it's getting kind of more muffled as it repeats, which is really good for kind of shoegaze, because you don't always want everything to be clean. You want it to kind of get that kind of nice softness, kind of like an analog warmth almost to it. I think that delay is... I'm going to try a longer one. Cool. I'm also going to pan it a little bit for a bit of width and stick the reverb back on. So just for reference, with these ones off, we've got something like... perfectly nice, perfectly good, but if we want that kind of big sound... you can hear all that kind of tail there, and you can experiment as well. So you could put, for example, the delay after the reverb, and it changes the sound a little bit, because a delay is basically taking a signal and copying it, or reverb's adding on kind of a natural reverb sound. So depending where you put them in the chain, it's a fancy way of saying what order they're in, it impacts the sound. So for reference, that's making the delay, which is set to, I think I'd put it at 750 milliseconds. I try that at 450. It's making the delay more prominent, whereas if we put the delay in front of the reverb, it gets a bit kind of muddied by the reverb, which is probably what you'd want for this kind of effect we're going for here. I want to make things bigger and boomier as well. I'm going to add in a bit of pre-delay too. I'm just going to try and go all out with my reverb here, I should say, rather than delay. Hear all that kind of beautiful tail, and that's another great reason for using like your kind of P90s or a spangly sound. It means you can get away with these big reverbs where the sound does get a bit more muddy and mushy as it goes on without the mix getting too crowded. So the sound they've got is much better than what I've managed to knock together here, but hopefully it's demonstrating how this huge, where that sounds from. I mean, part of it's also from there's a full band behind it. There's a guitar that's got this really kind of great hissy overdrive. Just a huge kind of post-rock shoegaze kind of sound. Everything sounds awesome. It's a beautifully mixed song. And here you can hear a huge tail of reverb and delay when it goes down to the guitar and the vocals. So it's I think this is cymbal, but to me it also sounds like they're letting the kind of ambient effects, is what you can kind of call them, because they create ambience, fade out. So rather than them stopping dead and it being cutting down to the guitar, there's this kind of nice fade in transition. And then it's really cool because the bass is coming in and doing this tapping thing, along with the drums, just adding a dynamic shift up. And the drums not doing, instead of just doing a kind of standard beat, it's doing this kind of more contemporary kind of dancey thing. It just adds a new dimension to kind of shoegazy thing that they've kind of gone for. It's kind of post-rock shoegazy thing. Also, the timbre of the voice is quite interesting because it's kind of different from a lot of other kind of shoegaze or post-rock things. Then here we're back to the... Yeah, we're back to this guitar idea we had before. The bass is adding in a lot of the kind of a lot of depth to it and moving about to keep it interesting. Yeah. The drums keeping up that dancey beat. Like, see if you played that with a halftime drums. So halftime drums would be like doom, doom. It'd sound much more kind of post-rock, the kind of heavier metal side, almost like veering towards Deftones of it. So it's really interesting that these little shifts, like just what your drum's doing, has such a huge impact on the vibe of the song. Three pieces are always very good at dynamics. The bass, particularly if you saw these guys live here, when the bass is kind of dropping out and coming back in, it'd be a huge through the PA. You'd feel it whenever the bass is coming in. When it drops out, it's going to get quieter, then you're going to feel it again. Incredibly impactful live, more so I would say than when it's been recorded. And here you can see, this is great, a great shot for it as well. Bass is going up and playing kind of higher notes in this little riffy part. So following the chords, do 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 do, but adding in an extra kind of rhythmic and melodic part with that kind of nice attack on the plectrum there. Cool rhythm. Did I skip forward there, or is that just a really abrupt change? Just an abrupt change, cool. So great, in contrast to when it went down to the guitar before, we had that kind of tail of the ambient effects. Here it is a dead stop. And it's also effective. It's just, these are all choices that you want to make, like how are we transitioning here? Do I want to be smooth? Do I want to be abrupt? What does it mean in the context of the song and all that kind of stuff? Yeah, that's really cool. You can hear that beautiful, those P90s, that treble, that kind of clarity. Look at that, Pat. That's a really, really cool guitar tone here. Yeah, that's great. This is the thing. There's a joy in hearing just a nice guitar tone. Like if that was, I don't know, a really kind of smooth, kind of jazzy neck pickup thing with the tone rolled down, you know, it's going to have a different vibe entirely. So we'll go like. And also, if there was delay on it, you know. So I don't think I've got the last chord quite right. They might be a half step down here because this bit's a bit fiddly, and it makes sense if they're tuned down half a step. But if you want this version of playing, I've got the 5th fret on the G up to 7, let that ring into the 4th fret of the B. And the way I'm playing this is possibly sliding. I'm not too sure if there's a slide there. 8th fret on the D, 6th on the B, so you have... And then... I'm not convinced I got that quite right, but the way I'm voicing it is 6 on the A, 5 on the D, open G, and then 4 on the B. So you got the 5, 7, 4 on the B, back to that 7 on the G, 8 on the D, 6 on the D, and then this chord, which is nothing, 6, 5, open 4. And you can hear how this lovely crisp tone that's much better than the one I've voiced together here just really impacts, which it just works. If it was a softer tone or a really delay-ridden one, it's not going to work as well. Similar with how there's that really nice line going on in the intro. If that didn't have all the delay on it, it wouldn't add that atmosphere to it. So here we are. Yeah. The way they've arpeggiated the chord instead of just strumming it, but kind of letting the pick glide through the strings, really nice. Back to this more atmospheric guitar tone. And again, there's a guitar underneath that's got loads of a really kind of hissy distortion, which is quite common for a kind of shoegaze type of sound. The drums there, I'm going to pop it back to make sure I'm not talking nonsense, doing a more standard beat. Yeah, so a more kind of straightforward dunk dunk for the chorus. The hi-hat might be on the offbeat, I can't quite hear it, which makes sense because sonically there's a lot more taken up with this big kind of hissy guitar in the background. The vocals kind of using a slight falsetto, so just soaring really nicely over everything. And on that note, it's just kind of really nice hooks and stuff. Not a particularly wordy song, not trying to cram a lot of syllables in. I like it kind of soar over the top of it, which makes sense with the type of music they're creating here. Alright, there's an interesting thing here. You might notice underneath the cymbal, you can see it a little bit here, but more so here. I feel like under the cymbal there's all these black things. That's usually to dampen it so the cymbal doesn't ring for quite as long. So I suspect they might have done that so it doesn't interfere with the kind of ambience from the guitar. That would be my guess. It might be for recording, it might just be an aesthetic thing, but when you hit a cymbal, there's a lot of high end off it, and also quite a lot of sustained low end if you let a cymbal ring for ages and then listen to it when it's like at a safe volume. It's a lot of lower frequency. So if you put these things on, it can help cut that sustain down a bit. And you can really hear the cymbal psh, psh, there. Sounds like a kind of a wave crashing against the shore. And a really beautiful harmony here, very high. So there's something really interesting going on with the voices there, and I don't know if it's the bassist doing a backing vocal and their voices are blending together in a really lovely way, or if the backing vocal's been slightly auto-tuned, because there's something going on that's just really cool. That sounds there's this sound you can get from I think Vocaloids are quite good examples of them, where it's almost sounds like naive but also kind of robotic, which is a really interesting aesthetic, because normally you'd need someone like a voice like Bjork to kind of convey naivety. She's an example of someone that can do that quite well. And for normally something that's auto-tuned just sounds a bit robotic and a bit auto-tuned, but there is a kind of synthetic voice thing. I mentioned Vocaloids because I had a trial run on one years and years ago because I thought the sounds were quite cool, but getting to grips with it and how much work it was to input stuff just wasn't worth it for me in the long run. But that's what's making me think of. Then they've got really cool stuff like this. So to balance out the big kind of swooping, kind of airy, kind of waves splashing against the rocks, you've got these tight unison lines and stabs. So but still using quite big open chords, so it's not too metal and kind of enclosed. What they're doing here is called unison, so the guitar and bass are playing the same notes. The guitar is obviously an octave higher, a higher register, but the notes are the same. Are the drums doing the same rhythm? Or are they just... Yeah, cool. So the drums are sometimes dropping out, or sometimes more or less following the rhythm to help it pop out. So it's like a kind of stab with the drums, guitar and bass by itself, drums doing a fill with the guitar and the bass, backing up the rhythm they're doing. Nice. Then this one that I thought was maybe an open string. Yeah, so this is where I can find out if they're down tuned or not as well. Yeah, cool. So they are down half a step. I'm assuming what I've had to do is tune my A down to an A flat, my D down to a D flat. And the move they're doing is hitting the A string, open A string, hammering on the 4th fret, and then picking the 6th fret and the D. And it's a sound I recognise. I would normally write things around the 5th and the 7th fret using that. But this here implies it's a kind of more major sound, which is more common with kind of post-rock. It's really cool, it's a bit different. So the way I would practice that is just keep it slow, and you can just do a down, hammer, and then pick up on the D. So down, hammer, upstroke, down, hammer, upstroke. Great little link to have up your sleeve. And just a huge chord there, that was wonderful. When I was talking about the overdubbed guitar creating a hiss as well, I think part of that is the bass having an overdrive on it. I think is a fair bit of high treble, high frequencies mixed into the way they're distorting their bass there. Which is, again, this is the 3-piece thing. You kind of want to decide what frequencies people get to have most of the time, and when you want to step on each other's toes to have like a huge sound. And here, this is a great example of the ambient stuff. So the way they did this in the studio is probably just having an ambient track. There's probably a guitar with just tons of delay on, or maybe even a synth with some reverb and delay in the background. Live, you generally want to put on a delay pedal but have it quite low in the mix. So if you remember before how I was moving that thing that said mix up and down, you quite often have things on pedals called wet and dry. So wet's the affected sound, dry's the unaffected sound. So you'd want the wet to be quite low in this setting and the dry to be quite high. So if you had one guitar and wanted to recreate it, you'd have quite a long kind of delay but not have it too high in the mix, so it's not so prominent. So you can hear all the notes are still very distinct that are being picked, but there's this lovely swirling texture underneath it. Then, which is either backing vocals or a sample. I'm assuming these guys are a band that use a click track to play along to and put stuff through the PA. So then again, you wouldn't even need to worry about this extra delay pedal. You could just have it come through your PA if you want that ambient swirl. And it makes these big sections where they're, hitting the rhythm at the same time all the more impactful. Oh, this bit's just going a bit manic, isn't it? That's cool. Where are we? It's a cool kind of high hammer-on-y line here. Almost sounds like it's tapped with the drums just going for it. Back to that great spangly thing. And again, this transition here, instead of being a dead stop with the ambience, there's got that kind of swirl still. Where is it? Just about here? There. You can still hear kind of shimmering away in the background. And this is the thing that's worth mentioning. You see here the strumming very much over the neck pickup. You get a slightly different sound if you strum here. Oh yeah, those two strings are right tuned. Here to here. To tune that up. So hopefully tuned up now. Yeah, if you strum here, it sounds a bit different to here. So a bit brasher here near the bridge. So I've not even got that in frame. So if you're playing here as opposed to here, this is a bit warmer. So even if you got that spangly sound and you want it to be not too bright, which might be if you play there, if you got. The other thing here is if you use a thinner plectrum, you get a really nice snap as it goes across the strings, but it does mean that picking notes or playing kind of faster things are a bit trickier because the pick will flex as it goes over the strings. It's one of these things, if I'm doing a kind of session-y thing, I'll have different picks available live. I tend to just go for a kind of slightly thicker one, somewhere between 0.75 and 1.3, because it's thin enough that it's going to sound good, but not so thin that it's going to start flapping over the strings and cause me grief. But it's just an excuse for not bothering to practice with a thin plectrum, doing kind of a twiddly technical stuff enough. That is so cool. The transitions there between the tones and the stabs here, the kind of rhythm. And these great little, and this weird thumb tapping thing. Pause, was that a bit reverse reverb? Let's listen. Oh, okay, so there you can see the drummer going on the cymbal. What is either happened there is they've done a crescendo, like they've hit it so softer, then getting slowly louder, and in the studio they've just muted it, so they've moved the fader to 0. Or what they've done is taken a cymbal, that kind of sound, and reversed it. When you reverse the cymbal, it reverses the sound, so the kind of initial hit, when it's normally at the start, and then fades out, you kind of have a fade in, that abrupt sound. So I'd maybe say it was a reverse cymbal, which could be triggered by something or played through the PA as well, because it's not something you can achieve with a like an analog drum kit. And here you can hear loads of the elements mixing together like we had before. The kind of drums are gone to be more simplistic, making way for this big kind of fizzy static guitar sound, the lovely delay in the vocals just sitting nicely on top of it all. And there you can hear the texture, the change there, using the falsetto. And again, this ties into the texture thing, which is what this song and the kind of what they're going for is really about. It's a lot to do with timbre. If you had like a Robert Plant or like Brian Johnson, like AC/DC, kind of distorted high voice, it's not gonna, or Axl Rose, it's not gonna fit in with the music as well. And it's an interesting one, because there's sometimes you get complaints that there's not enough or at least commentary, there's not enough key changes in modern music, but it's largely in part that there's a shift away from key changes, which were very popular in the 60s, to music being a lot more to do with timbre. So that's like how something sounds. So if you take a group like Death Grips, they might just have like one or two kind of loops that go on, but they can be quite an intense kind of sound just going on throughout the song that establishes the vibe through the timbre. So, you know, it'd be like the case of, do you want something that sounds like a saxophone or sounds like a guitar? Do you want a death metal vocal here, or like a Robert Plant kind of scream with distortion? Or do you want this kind of clean falsetto thing? So I think their voices might just mix together really interestingly, because here, that was a tiny bit pitchy as they came out of it, which, unless you're a musician, you probably wouldn't notice at all. the vibrato goes off a wee bit. But I suppose that's the main vocal, so the one underneath might still be auto-tuned. So I might have said pitch shift instead of auto-tune there. Apologise if I did. And then we've got a solo to change things up. And the hi-hats on the offbeats. The hi-hat's the small cymbal that kind of goes through the song, not the big ones that go psh, that's like your crash cymbal. The ride is the so if you want a quick crash course, pun intended, I'm going to use that one, in cymbals, that's it. So you'll hear the hi-hat instead of being so on the offbeat, so you have this kind of right? Right, and then here, big change. Every din 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 din, you know, straight eighth notes, driving it home towards the final line, I think. Going to the snare there and the kick drum just to really ramp up the intensity. A huge fill on the toms going on. Battering out the two crash cymbals there. Back down to that great riff, spangly tone. To wrap things up, probably. Yeah. All right, what makes that last chord particularly impactful is it gets doubled. I'm trying to figure out where so the guitar actually sounds like it's fairly central just now. I was hearing it from the right before, but I might have just been mistaken. But if you listen for this final chord, I think the guitar or the riff sounded like it was in the middle, and for that final chord I was hearing it doubled, so being played in the left and the right. That's really cool. It's a production trick I've never noticed before, never consciously noticed before. I might have heard. The guitar is just mono, so it doesn't have a lot of width in the kind of audio field. And that last chord, double tracked, so recording it once here, recording it once here, playing those both together, and that's why it's sounding so kind of lush. It's a nice chord anyway. That's a really cool production trick. And cool. Strumming through it as well, and then bringing the audio field back in for this last bit, so you have this big whang, and then back in to wrap up the song. Yeah, cool. Nice one. And if you're still with me after all that, you might as well hit subscribe to keep updated with the channel. Check out these videos. You can support me on Patreon or chuck a request my way if you got one. But cheers, guys. I hope you're having a great one.